Some of the experiences I wish to share in these videos might at first be quite difficult to believe, but I just want to say that I have absolutely no intention of misleading or lying to you. After all, I acknowledge you, whoever you are, to be a fragment of all that is, or God, or whatever you want to call it, and to lie to you would be the same as lying to the divine, and that's not something I would ever wish to do. But saying that, I can understand any skepticism you may feel when you hear about these experiences. Well, maybe not this particular experience, but perhaps some of the other ones I plan on talking about. My intention for creating this channel and sharing this content is to help those who seek to explore Kundalini and other inner experiences. Ideally, I would like to help those who seek to bring other dimensions of awareness into everyday waking consciousness. I would also like to help those who have experienced severe trauma heal through self-affirming inner experiences that can lead to inner transformation and healing. And if you have any questions about anything, I will be happy to answer them if I can. I achieved my Kundalini Awakening in early November 2016, and it occurred during my evening meditation. It only took 3 months of dedicated study and practice, but by the time I'd made Kundalini my goal, I had already learned how to clear my mind for a prolonged period of time. I meditated every evening 2 to 4 hours and have been meditating seriously since mid-2014. I meditated before 2014 too, but it was usually just a sporadic half hour here or there. During the 3-month period of dedicated effort, I studied the chakras or energy centers and the role they played within my everyday experience. When I felt love, for instance, I would scan my body and feel the source of this energy and location of it. I would then try and interact and manipulate the flow of this energy by using a very simple breathing technique along with supportive mental visualization. I also compiled a reference guide while studying chakras, which I'll include in the video's description below, and you're free to do whatever you want with it. It's mostly just keywords, but it could be helpful if you're just starting out. The Seth material by Jane Roberts helped me out a lot, and I had done extensive work to resolve limiting beliefs that were detrimental to my goal. That was a very important step, but I'll go more into that later, or in another video. The prospect of awakening my own Kundalini energy has been an on and off interest of mine for a number of years. Prior to experiencing my own, I had read countless theories exploring the mysterious nature of this energy. I had also read a lot of other people's personal accounts relating to it, and through reading other people's experiences, I managed to develop a general sense of what Kundalini might feel like. I must admit that I intentionally glossed over a lot of the warnings and horror stories, as I thought the potential fear could possibly hamstring my attempts, so I decided to move forward operating under the belief that I would not experience something I wasn't ultimately prepared to handle. I knew from what I'd read that it probably wouldn't be the smartest thing for me to do, considering I've suffered with depression, social anxiety, and insomnia on and off for most of my life. I also used to always have a tendency of expecting the worst in the face of the unknown, and to some extent, I do still have that. For these reasons, I'm certain I would have been considered high risk by certain online communities I was a part of, that seemed to do their utmost in instilling the fear of God into people about this subject. And while I understood their general reasoning, I still wanted to experience this for myself, regardless of any possible risks. It wasn't really what I expected, in all honesty, but I don't regret my experience. As vulnerable and terrified as I have been at times, I do not regret walking this path. I do not regret my recklessness, and if I was ever given the option to end this process, I would not. It has been a fascinating process and journey, and I truly am excited by the prospects of what tomorrow could bring as a result of my practices today. I will say that in my naivety, I believed that by achieving Kundalini I'd experience an awakening of sorts and somehow find a way to spontaneously heal or move beyond inner trauma and the emotional suffering I've struggled with over the years. I knew from the beginning that I was essentially setting myself up for a sink or swim scenario. Common internal dialogue prior to the Kundalini Awakening would revolve around the following. Why do I find it so difficult to be with others? Why have I found it so hard to integrate into the world of today? Why do I feel worthless? Am I a bad person? Am I worthy of love? Why can't I forgive myself for the mistakes I have made? Why do I yearn for non-existence or some kind of off switch? Did I truly choose to be here? Why do I find it so difficult to express myself? As I said, I really thought that by achieving a Kundalini Awakening, I'd suddenly have all the answers to my questions and be able to cure all my ails through sheer knowing. Since it was my belief at the time my suffering was being caused by my own ignorance, which I do still accept to be the case. I just can't help but find my original outlook a bit funny. Anyway, however naive my intentions were, I partly achieved some of my early goals as a result of this forever changing and evolving radical inner experience. It's fair to say that by experiencing this, I have been offered first-hand insight into the questions related to my own suffering and existential dread. But for every answer I've been able to discern, 50 questions have arose to take their place. Like I said, it took 3 months to achieve Kundalini from when I first made it my intention. This may sound like a short duration of time, but again, this was on the back of years of daily meditation and study of other metaphysical subjects. It's also clear to me that a lot of my early interests and life events have served in this goal. Not that I'm suggesting my awakening was predetermined or anything like that, but I can definitely see a lot of my early interests and past experiences have both served and facilitated me in my endeavour. I won't go into this now, but in future videos I do hope to speak a little more about these early experiences and how they helped and aided with the Kundalini attempts. Now, I understand this may sound somewhat tasteless, but while attempting to further understand the root and sacral centres, I couldn't help but appreciate the sheer intensity of pleasure I could derive from interacting with these centres. It was like a sexual energy, but without any fixation. Yeah, it's not like our, thinking of naked women or anything like that. It was just a raw experience of very physical feeling energy. I found that by surrendering myself completely to this energy, I could almost achieve an orgasm without any physical contact. I would also experience a lot of odd inner and physical phenomena. For instance, when the intense physical energy would begin to peak during my exercises, I noticed that I would experience contractions in my stomach, similar to the contractions I experience when I climb in a hot bath. I was completely astounded by the deeply physical and unconventional experiences that became possible within my body in the run-up to having the Kundalini Awakening. It's quite difficult to be as open and candid about such personal experiences, but these intimate experiences allowed me to develop the ability to completely surrender to this primal creative energy and even influence it to some extent. After meditating for approximately 2 hours, I began to practice my exercises. With a clear mind, I began drawing energy via my breath to the root chakra, and I quickly became aware of a pressure building inside and around, I still don't know the proper word for it, gooch area. Do you know the space between? Yeah, I'm not aware of the proper term for that, should I looked it up? The pressure when halted in the gooch by my hesitation and alarm felt somewhat terrifying, especially since this pressure seemed to culminate in and around my testicles. It really felt as if the space between my balls and backside were being pushed in. This was enough to delay my Kundalini Awakening by about a week or so, until I experienced it enough to know that my balls weren't going to blow up or fall off or something silly. And the balls felt quite sore some evenings in response to these repeated attempts. I suppose in some way it was like a energetic form of edging, as each time I repeated this exercise, the experience seemed to grow more and more intense, and the prospect of arousing this energy became likelier with each serious attempt. The pressure eventually gave way to a welling sensation, and by welling I mean Do you know when you feel love and it can start quite mild, minor, and kind of increase in intensity, like wave-like? That's what I mean by welling. So this welling sensation quickly intensified and became a swelling sensation. So, just kind of like growing. The energy seemed to grow exponentially. This process, when allowed, felt completely automatic. And I really didn't have to do much beyond this point, other than trust in the process and allow it to unfold. I was so used to utilizing mental visualization by this point, and as I passed the threshold, I remember spontaneously seeing a flower blooming in my mind's eye. And while I attempted to process what I was experiencing, I also remember feeling as if there was a balloon inflating throughout my entire lower region. It felt as if I was slightly elevated, or as if I was sat on a football or something. I was completely struck by how deeply physical this experience felt. Suddenly I felt all the blood rush to my genitalia, followed by a deep, energetic eruption that swept throughout my lower body like a rising fire. I quickly felt it spread to my sacral chakra, followed by my solar plexus, and the energy appeared to culminate in my heart before surging upwards towards the higher chakras. I remember the temperature of my body increasing quite a lot throughout all of this too. Ordinarily, my hands are usually quite cold, but throughout this process, the temperature of my body had definitely increased. As the energy surged upwards like a rising fire, I noticed the energy carried the vibration and experience of the chakras it had touched or moved past. So it was like as the energy rose, it was becoming imbued with the will to act, the need to create, the urge to love. Instead of hearing the singular pluck of a guitar string, I felt the equivalent of a beautifully rich chord. It was as if each chakra added another dimension to this energy. As it continued to ascend higher and higher, I became more aware of this rhythmic, almost electrical pulsing throughout my entire body. Goosebumps covered my arms, and my arm hair felt as if it was standing on end. I felt this magnetic rhythmic pulsing throughout my entire body, and what I'd come to understand as my energy body. The pulsing was almost audible to me. It kind of reminded me of the sound effect they used in the movie Contact when they first receive an unknown alien signal. The pulsing affected my body the way musical vibrations would affect water, or how an electrical current can possess a metal object. Deeply physical. As the experience began to peak, I started to feel intense pressure just above my ears. The energy then reached my forehead and crown, and as it did, I saw a flash of brilliant orange-yellow light. It felt as if I was staring into the sun. With eyes closed, I began to feel the dimensions of my inner self open up. And this is quite difficult for me to describe, but it felt like I just walked out from a cupboard under the stairs, out into a colossal football stadium. The darkness we usually see with eyes closed was replaced with what seemed like a sense of physical space. I couldn't really see anything after this, but I felt as if I was looking out into a vast space-like void. My consciousness felt imbued with a quality I'd never experienced prior. My whole being felt as if I was being bathed or saturated in the most intense energy imaginable. As the experience continued to unfold, I felt supported by the deeper portions of my own identity. And what I mean by that is there was just a sense of certainty that it was okay to move forward. I also felt that I had glimpsed some of my own latent creative potential, and in that moment, I felt as if there was nothing I couldn't do. I also felt an immeasurable sense of unconditional love and a sense of pride in what I'd accomplished. I felt I'd finally found my path, and that was a very emotional experience. But to cut a long story short, like a teenager who had just discovered the joy of beating off for the first time, I wanted to keep going and repeating this initial experience. I desperately wanted to re-experience everything. And over the following days, I was able to repeatedly induce the inflating sensation and would continuously flood my lower centers with this energy. I was able to increase and reduce the intensity of this energy. to, and I really longed to just dissolve into it, because it really did feel like a blend of unconditional love, pure life force, and also sexual ecstasy. And then one evening, I realised I could no longer achieve it. I could no longer achieve the inflating sensation, and felt as if I'd depleted myself or something. And then I began to reluctantly entertain the possibility I might never experience something like this again. And I really couldn't have been more wrong about that. I will be happy to share my technique in time, but I would first like to make some follow-up videos documenting what followed the Kundalini Awakening, so that you can determine for yourself whether or not it is something you actually wish to experience. And not that you're even guaranteed to have the same experience. I believe the Kundalini experience can vary quite a lot depending on your dominant center. Are you primarily emotional, intellectual, physical? I can't help but feel this is important. I am emotional, physical, and this reflects the nature of my experience. It was very emotional, but like I've stressed throughout all of this, it was very physical too. The Kundalini Awakening was a fairly simple process, and as dramatic and extreme as it felt, it now represents only 1% of what I went on to experience.